But now to some breaking news. Our newsroom just confirming that the widow and son of former Cook County Commissioner Dennis Deer have died after a shooting in their Homan Square home. Now, this is video of police investigating around 6 last night at Arthington and St. Louis. 51-year-old Barbara Deer and 23-year-old Kaleb Deer were found in the home. The medical examiner's office says Barbara was shot 3 times and the son was shot once in his head. It's not.
A notification appeared on his phone. A hard fall detected. His mother's Apple Watch had sent the alert, synced directly to his device. He called her immediately. No answer. He called his brother. No answer. He sent a family friend to the house. The friend drove to 3500 West Arthington Street on Chicago's west side. When he arrived, the first thing he noticed was the dog. The family dog was outside, alone, barking, and had been for a while. The family car was parked out back. Someone was home, had to be. He tried the front door. It was bolted shut from the inside. He pulled out his phone and texted both numbers. No response. He called 911. Chicago Fire Department arrived and forced their way through that door. And what they found inside that house changed everything. Welcome to the Crime Edition. Today we are covering one of the most shocking cases to come out of Chicago in recent memory. A case that has left an entire community searching for answers. The case of Barbara and Kaleb Deer. This was not a family on the margins. This was Chicago's most publicly admired family. A man who spent his entire career fighting to make mental health care accessible to the people who needed it most. A woman who picked up that mission after he was gone and kept building. Nobody saw this coming. Not the neighbors, not the politicians, not the people who loved them. We are bringing you the full story and the latest confirmed updates. If you are new here, subscribe right now. The Crime Edition stays on these cases long after the news cycle moves on. New details in this case are still emerging. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. We read every single one. Now, let's get into it. Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. Just before 6 p.m., Chicago Police Department's 11th District responded to a call at 3500 West Arthington Street in the Homan Square community on the city's west side. Chicago Fire Department had already forced entry. Officers moved through the property. They reached the basement. Inside, they found a 51-year-old woman and a 23-year-old man, both unresponsive. Both pronounced dead at the scene at 6:53 p.m. A black handgun was recovered on the floor near the young man's hand. Multiple spent shell casings were found nearby. There were no signs of forced entry into the home. The front door had been bolted shut from the inside. That single detail told investigators something immediately. There was no third party who entered and left. Whatever happened in that basement happened between the two people found there. Area 4 detectives took jurisdiction from the 11th District. That handoff is standard procedure in Chicago for deaths that are complex, high-profile, or require investigation that extends beyond the first 48 hours. Area 4 began working the scene. The Chicago Police Department initially classified the case as a double homicide, standard protocol when the cause and sequence of deaths has not yet been medically determined. By Wednesday, the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office had completed full autopsies on both victims. The findings were clear and the ruling was official. The woman, 51-year-old Barbara Deer, had sustained 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. Her manner of death was ruled a homicide. The man, 23-year-old Kaleb Deer, had sustained a single gunshot wound to the head. His manner of death was ruled a suicide. The Cook County Medical Examiner confirmed the sequence. Kaleb Deer had shot his mother, Barbara Deer, first. Then he turned the gun on himself. No arrests, no other suspects. The case was reclassified. This was a murder-suicide. What the physical evidence could confirm was the sequence. What it could not confirm, and what no autopsy ever can, was why. To understand what happened inside that house on April 14th, you have to go back, not days, years. Barbara Deer was born and raised in North Lawndale on Chicago's West Side. She grew up in that neighborhood, and she never left it. That was a choice, not a circumstance. And for the people who knew her, that choice said everything about who she was. She earned her bachelor's degree in communication disorders from Jackson State University. She then went on to complete her master's degree in speech-language pathology at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She built her credentials deliberately and put them to work immediately. For nearly 2 decades, Barbara Deer worked as a licensed speech-language pathologist inside Chicago public schools. Her job was to identify students who were struggling to communicate, children who could not yet put words to what they needed, and make sure they got the right support. She did that work for almost 20 years. But Barbara was not just working inside the school system. She built something of her own. She established a private practice, a firm that grew to include 14 therapists working under her direction. She was also the CEO of Metamorphosis Health, her consulting company, and she served as the executive director of Juneteenth, Illinois, a nonprofit organization she took over and continued to grow. Outside of her professional roles, Barbara sat on the board of the Lawndale Christian Legal Center. She contributed to the North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council's Arts and Culture Committee. She volunteered with Friends of Dennis Deer. She served on a social justice committee. She was an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She also kept a personal blog covering topics from natural hair care to vegetarianism. She enjoyed sewing. She organized community walks in her neighborhood, and the week she died, she had sent a message to a neighborhood group text inviting people to join the first community walk of 2026, scheduled for Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. She had recently become a first-time grandmother, a baby girl. Karen Archer, a neighbor and close family friend of 20 years, described Barbara simply. She said the family's children grew up together playing basketball in the alley. She told the Chicago Tribune, "I'm so numb I don't know what to do." David Sanders, president of Malcolm X College, had worked alongside Barbara directly on Juneteenth, Illinois. He told reporters, "We were looking forward to this year. This is a loss, a big loss." There was also this. After her husband's death, Barbara Deer formally applied to be appointed to fill out the remainder of his term on the Cook County Board. Party officials chose former Alderman Michael Scott Jr. instead. Commissioner Scott later said publicly that during that appointment process, he had marveled at Barbara Deer's ability to not only remain positive, but to actively channel her grief into advocacy for personal health and mental wellness. That observation, coming from the man selected over her, speaks to exactly how Barbara presented herself to the world, even in her most difficult moments. She was, by every public measure, holding it together. At the time of her death, Barbara was receiving a union endorsement from SEIU Local 73 for a potential run at the 2nd District Cook County Board seat, the same seat her husband had held. She was not just preserving a legacy, she was preparing to step into it. Dennis Deer is inseparable from this story, not as a footnote, as the foundation. Dennis was born and raised on the same West Side streets where he would later serve as an elected official. He attended Collins High School, where at 17 years old, he met a girl named Barbara at an academic and athletic awards banquet. She was 15 and walking out with her twin sister, arms full of trophies and bikes from a perfect attendance award. Dennis saw her and made a decision. He followed them outside, introduced himself to her mother, and offered to help load everything into the car. Barbara never forgot that moment. They were together from that day forward. Dennis went on to earn a bachelor's degree in elementary and special education, a master's degree in rehabilitation psychology, both from Jackson State University, and a PhD in Christian psychology. His credentials extended further. He was a certified rehabilitation counselor, a licensed clinical professional counselor, a certified corrective thinking therapist. Before entering politics, he ran a drug treatment and counseling center in Lawndale. He served as senior vice president at the Lawndale Christian Legal Center, which provides criminal defense and social services for young people on the West Side. He also served as a council member at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. In July 2017, following the death of his mentor and predecessor, Commissioner Robert Steele, Dennis Deer was appointed to serve on the Cook County Board of Commissioners representing the 2nd District. He won election to a full term in 2018 and was re-elected in 2022. He served for 7 years in total. In that role, Dennis chaired the Health and Hospitals Committee and served as vice chair of the Cook County Health Board, where he helped oversee roughly half of an $8.8 billion budget. His legislative record was substantial. He authored a resolution declaring racism a public health crisis in Cook County in 2019. He declared mental health itself a public health crisis. He secured a $60 million fund using federal ARPA dollars specifically for mental health programming. He co-sponsored legislation making Juneteenth a county holiday. He also spoke openly and repeatedly about something personal. When Dennis was 10 years old, he witnessed a murder in his neighborhood. The trauma of that experience and the post-traumatic stress that followed was part of what shaped his entire professional focus on behavioral health. He said so publicly. He used his own story to make the case for why these systems mattered. In 2023, Dennis underwent a double lung transplant. The procedure was necessary because of a rare genetic condition in which his chest organs were positioned in reverse, a condition that created serious complications over time. He fought through the surgery and the recovery, but in June 2024, complications from the transplant took his life. Dennis Deer died on June 23, 2024. He was 51 years old. After his death, a street on Chicago's West Side was renamed in his honor. The Lawndale Christian Legal Center named its new multi-million-dollar headquarters and residential workforce development center the Dr. Dennis Deer Community Justice Center. Barbara was present at that dedication. She stood before the crowd and spoke about the man she had known since she was 15 years old, the man who had followed her to the parking lot, the master motivator who made everyone around him believe they could do it. She smiled through it. She always did. Mayor Brandon Johnson, who had served alongside Dennis on the Cook County Board, described him as one of the nicest politicians he had ever worked with. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle called him a fierce champion of equity in every space he entered. But this is the part that public statements don't fully capture. Dennis Deer was not just a public figure to this family. He was their center. And when he died, the center was gone. This brings us to Kaleb. Kaleb Deer was 23 years old. He was one of Dennis and Barbara's twin sons. His brother was Kanan, his sister Trinity. He had grown up on the same West Side block his parents had never left. He had watched his father build something real in that community. And when Dennis died, Kaleb made a public promise to carry it forward. The day after his father passed, Kaleb posted on Facebook, tagging his mother. He wrote, "I love you forever. You came into this world and hit the ground running from birth." That post was not just grief, it was a declaration. Kaleb stepped directly into his father's institutional world. He went to work at the Dr. Dennis Deer Community Justice Center, part of the Lawndale Christian Legal Center, the building named for his father, in the community his father served. He was also, at the time of his death, in the process of pursuing his master's degree. State Representative LaShawn Ford, a close family friend, confirmed this. Ford also described Kaleb as an artist who was working to build his own brand. He called Kaleb a business person and a strong family man. Ford said plainly that Dennis Deer was Kaleb's rock, the one Kaleb turned to above everyone else. And when Dennis died, Kaleb lost that anchor. Cook County Commissioner Bill Lowry became close with both Kaleb and Kanan after Dennis passed. He called them nephew. He told reporters that on March 28, 2026, 17 days before the shooting, Kaleb called him. Lowry had recently lost his niece, who died at 33 years old. The call came on the same day as her celebration of life. Kaleb had reached out to check on Lowry, not to talk about himself, to check on someone else. Lowry described Kaleb that day as very quiet, very reflective, but present, thoughtful, caring. That phone call on March 28th is the last documented contact anyone who has spoken publicly has reported having with Kaleb Deer before April 14th, a gap of 17 days. No welfare check was made, no crisis referral was filed, no emergency call was placed to that address. U.S. Representative Danny Davis, who had known the Deer family for decades, told reporters after the shooting that he had heard mention of Kaleb's depression following his father's death. Not from a referral, not from an intervention, he had heard mention of it. Davis said, "It is devastating. It is so tragic and so unfortunate. It's an indication that we need to spend much more time, much more money, much more effort dealing with behavioral health issues and the advent of trauma." That statement, heard mention of it, is the only named sourced reference to Kaleb's mental state before April 14, 2026 that exists in the public record. If you are finding this case as important as we do, hit that subscribe button right now. The Crime Edition is one of the few channels actively tracking this case for new developments. Toxicology results are still pending. When they are released, we will cover it. Subscribe so you do not miss that update. Now let's continue. Area 4 detectives worked the scene through the night of April 14th and into the following day. In a case where no living suspect exists, the investigative process shifts its purpose entirely. The goal is no longer building a case for prosecution. There is no defendant. There is no trial. There will be no courtroom proceedings in this case because the only person responsible for the homicide also died at the scene. The case is resolved through the medical examiner's forensic findings and the final CPD report, not through a verdict. What that shift means in practice is that the documentation becomes the record. It must be thorough, accurate, and complete, not to satisfy a jury, but to satisfy the historical and medical record and to give the family left behind an honest accounting of what happened. The basement was processed fully. In a murder-suicide investigation, forensic analysts examined gunshot residue on the hands of both deceased, the placement and position of the weapon at the scene, wound trajectory, and physical evidence consistent with the confirmed sequence of events. In this case, all of it aligned. The black handgun found on the floor near Kaleb's hand, the spent shell casings, the wound patterns, and the GSR analysis all supported the same conclusion the medical examiner officially confirmed. Kaleb Deer shot his mother first, then himself. There was no suicide note, no written explanation was left behind. In cases without a note and without a living suspect, investigators rely on the physical scene, digital records, and accounts from people who knew the individuals involved to reconstruct what was building in the days and weeks before an incident like this one. Standard procedure in these cases includes seeking access to phones, messaging histories, and digital records to understand the relational and emotional state of those involved. Whether warrants for that material were sought and granted in this case has not been confirmed publicly. That review, if conducted, would remain part of the internal investigative file. One detail that has not been addressed publicly is the origin of the black handgun recovered at the scene. Its registration, ownership, and how it came to be inside that home have not been disclosed. That is a gap in the public record that remains open. The Cook County Medical Examiner's toxicology results for both Barbara and Kaleb Deer were pending as of this recording. In Cook County, toxicology results typically take 4 to 6 weeks to process and return. Those results may or may not reveal information relevant to Kaleb's state of mind on April 14th. When they are released, they will be part of any updated reporting on this case. Reverend Chris Griffin has lived in the Homan Square neighborhood for years. He was a longtime member of the Homan Square Resident Association and a neighbor of the Deer family. After the news broke, he spoke to WGN-TV. He told them that in the period before April 14th, neighbors had picked up on what he described as multiple red flags at the Deer family home. He did not say what those red flags were. No follow-up reporting has produced those specifics. He also told ABC7 Chicago, "You never know if someone there is still mourning from the loss of something, and you never know what families are going through. So we are trying to be supportive." That statement captures something important. The red flags Griffin referenced never became a call, never became a check, never reached any formal system. There is no documented welfare request for that address, no record of concern that crossed from neighbor observation into official action. Karen Archer, who had lived next door to the Deer family for 20 years and whose children grew up alongside Barbara's, put it most directly. She told the Chicago Tribune, his dad, Dennis Deer, had a mental health foundation, so for this to come boomerang back, only for his wife and child to succumb to death this way, it's just devastating. That one sentence carries the weight of the entire case. By Wednesday morning, April 15th, the news had broken across Chicago, and the response that came in the hours that followed said something specific about who this family was to the people who knew them. Cook County Board President Tony Presswinkle issued a formal statement. The Deer family has long been well known in the community for their compassion and steadfast commitment to others. Their presence and service touched countless lives. Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch called Barbara a pillar in our community, giving her time, her energy, and her love, including volunteering at our back-to-school health fair year after year. Cook County Board Commissioner Stanley Moore told reporters, "It's very troubling. I couldn't sleep last night. I feel very sorry for the children. Their daughter was away at school." Commissioner Michael Scott Jr., the same man who had been selected over Barbara for the board appointment in 2024, described the Deer family as pillars of the North Lawndale community for years, calling them wonderful friends and people of faith. State Representative LaShawn Ford, one of the family's closest friends, did not hold back. He called the situation a state of emergency for local government leaders on the issue of mental health access. He called the shooting a cry for help. He told reporters, "So many people right now, whether we know it or not, are struggling with mental and behavioral health challenges, and there's nowhere to turn for some people." He also said plainly, they were the model black family in the community. Mayor Brandon Johnson called the Deers true West Siders, deeply connected to community and faith. He said Barbara brought that same level of love and intensity to Chicago public schools that Dennis had brought to the county board. He added, "I know sometimes I might come across, at times, a little dug in, because I know when these issues are unaddressed and families do not have the support that they need, it causes tragedy." Governor J.B. Pritzker issued written condolences to the family and to the 2nd District community. Bob Ryder, president of the Chicago Federation of Labor, pledged that the CFL would continue the Deer family's legacy in Lawndale. He said, "The Deer family is a part of the CFL family." SEIU Local 73, the union that had been preparing to formally endorse Barbara for the county board, went silent. The Lawndale Christian Legal Center, which had just opened the Dr. Dennis Deer Community Justice Center, the building Barbara helped bring to life where Kaleb had been working, was now mourning the two people most connected to its creation. On Wednesday evening, neighbors gathered outside the Deer home. Karen Archer placed a bouquet of tulips on the front porch. Tucked with the flowers was a handwritten note. It read, "In loving memory of our neighbors, rest in heavenly peace. Sincerely, Block D." Balloons were released in pink and green, Barbara's aka sorority colors. And at 6 p.m. that same evening, the community walking group that Barbara had organized went ahead as planned. They walked without her, in her honor, because that is who she was to them. There are two people at the center of what comes next, and their names deserve to be said clearly. Kanan Deer is Kaleb's twin brother. It was his Apple Watch notification, synced to his mother's device, that set the entire chain of events into motion on April 14th. He is now the only surviving son. Trinity Deer is the youngest sibling. She was away at school the evening this happened. She learned what had happened to her mother and her brother from a distance. Commissioner Moore confirmed this publicly. In under 2 years, this family lost 3 people. Dennis in June 2024. Barbara and Kaleb on the same evening in April 2026. Barbara had recently become a grandmother for the first time, a baby girl. That child will grow up without her. Kaleb Deer had spoken publicly at the dedication of the Dr. Dennis Deer Community Justice Center not long before all of this. He stood at the podium, introduced himself as the youngest twin, and made the crowd smile. He closed his remarks with the phrase his father always used. He said, "The hustle continues, and it will continue. It always will continue." Commissioner Lowry and others connected to Juneteenth, Illinois, confirmed the organization will carry on. The scholarship fund continues. The center continues. The walking group continues. What does not continue is the family that built all of it. Dennis Deer spent his career declaring mental health a public health crisis. He passed legislation. He secured funding. He spoke from personal experience about what untreated trauma costs a person and a community. Barbara Deer spent nearly 20 years inside Chicago's public schools, identifying the children who could not say what they needed and making sure someone heard them. Kaleb Deer worked in the building named for his father. He was pursuing a graduate degree. He was building his own identity as an artist. And on March 28th, 17 days before April 14th, he spent his last documented phone call checking on someone else's grief while carrying his own. The only person who named what Kaleb may have been going through, U.S. Representative Danny Davis, said he had heard mention of Kaleb's depression. Not from a formal referral, not from a documented intervention. He had heard mention of it. LaShawn Ford said it clearly. Dennis was Kaleb's rock. When Dennis died, Kaleb lost the one person he turned to above all others, and the household he lived in, the one Chicago watched, admired, and was about to send back to the county board, was not a household with room to fall apart visibly. It was a household organized around legacy, continuity, and public expectation. Karen Archer said what everyone else seemed to be thinking, but hadn't put directly into words. His dad had a mental health foundation, so for this to come boomerang back, only for his wife and child to succumb to death this way, it's just devastating. Ford called it a cry for help and a state of emergency. Mayor Johnson said directly that when families do not have the support they need, it causes tragedy. The family that represented that fight most publicly in Chicago paid the highest price for that gap. That is not a commentary. That is the record of what happened. As of this recording, the toxicology results for Barbara and Kaleb Deer have not been released. The origin of the weapon recovered at the scene has not been disclosed. The specific red flags that Reverend Griffin referenced have not been detailed publicly. The motive is officially unconfirmed. The case is administratively closed. The questions it leaves are not. Kaleb and Trinity Deer are still here. The Dr. Dennis Deer Community Justice Center is still operating. Juneteenth, Illinois, including its scholarship fund, is continuing under new leadership. The walking group walked on Wednesday. Block D left flowers on the porch. And somewhere in a city that called this family its brightest lights, 2 children are now carrying what 3 people left behind. Kaleb sutted at the podium, his father's words, the only ones that seem to hold in a moment like this. The hustle continues. If this case stayed with you, subscribe to the Crime Edition right now. We are actively tracking this case for new developments, including the toxicology results when they become available, and any further details that emerge from the investigative record. This is not a case we are walking away from. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear this story, and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what question does this case leave you with? We will see you in the next one.